Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Paranormal Lens podcast presented by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I am Jamie Widener. I will be your host for this evening, and joined as always I have Chad Thomas and Kirstin Tricano. Friends, how are we? What's going on?
We're great, Jamie. We're great.
Oh,
How's that for
I like
positive?
how Chad's your spokesmodel. That's perfect. All right, cool. All right. Good night, everybody.
There we go.
And that's it. Yeah, what a week, right? It's only Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Saturday was a very full day for me. The Ren Fair rehearsals started back up. So
Oh, yeah.
it was a lot of just, here's everything. Now let's dig in. So it's going to be a very fun season. I'm excited to kind of be a Muppet again because I feel like every Ren Fair is you got the main character who's the only human being and the rest of us are Muppets. So
Okay.
I get to be a Muppet.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, the Ren Fair is a big deal, though. Like, at least in our area here in South Central Pennsylvania, it's the place where it attracts everybody, and there's something for everyone while you're there. So,
I've met people from England that were like, every year we come here. It's like you would travel across half the world to come to a Ren Fair
From England,
which
is where a lot of the Renaissance. Anyway,
we think it's a home game, right? There.
Yeah.
Listen, I love when I get a compliment from them where they're like, "Wow, we can't even tell that you're faking an accent."
I can't tell you're faking one right now, so
I got an accent. No, the goal is for this year. I can't fully disclose yet who I am, what I'm doing, all that type of stuff until the fair announces it. I can say though, I'm not English. If I can get a person from that country, if they come to the Ren Fair and like, wow, I can't tell you're putting on an accent, I've made it.
Okay. More to come. I like this.
Yeah. So
hopefully the next week or two I can say something.
Cool.
Okay. Well, it's worth waiting for.
So my Saturday was at a dance recital. We talked about that. I was not dancing.
I really wish you were.
Jamie was not dancing, though he could have had the opportunity. They did some inflatable costume dances. He could have gotten up on stage and walked across, but
an opportunity was missed.
No, I don't think so.
An opportunity was missed.
This is normally about an hour. It's the youngest kids in a class, and they, at the end of the year, they do a presentation. They cut off for the summer once the school year ends. So, this is it. And it's usually like go, go, go. And there's always the need to transition between pieces to change costumes, get reset. And it's always a little awkward sometimes, because there's just like uncomfortable pause. And they filled the time this year with these inflatable costumes and somebody like dancing across the stage to some lively tune of some kind. And it was fun. It was a nice little interlude to move and break the time up so you're not just sitting there, you're watching something more. So I thought it was pretty genius. Mm-hmm. What we didn't know is that the costumes were just dropped backstage and the director just said, hey, figure it out. So some of it looked like they were just figuring out as they went. It was all fun.
And they didn't know what music was coming because I picked the music as well. And it was just like, pick some lively, upbeat stuff, So we had anything from the William Tell Overture to the Benny Hill theme.
Benny Hill theme was my favorite one, yeah. But for those of us old enough to know what that is, that's funny.
I don't know what that is.
No.
So anyway.
You have to Google that one.
So that was the highlight of my weekend. Well, I did go to my dad's and get some work done. It was a nice day Sunday to be out in the sun and working and getting some yard work done for him.
Absolutely, yes. Same kind of stuff here. I did something though for myself, and I think we've heard of this guy named Steve Dills, right?
Yeah.
No.
You know who he is? Does it ring a bell? All right. Well, our listeners know who he is. He's been a guest here 4 or 5 times now. Steve wrote this book, The Ghosts We Carry.
It's blurred.
I know. There's a bad angle here. So there it is. I can't get it right.
Close enough.
There it is. The Ghosts We Carry is what it's called. That's what matters the most. The sub of it is Grief, Haunted Places, and the People Who Never Leave Us. It was available on the 24th, Sunday the 24th. I ordered it, but because of the holiday on the 25th, it took an extra day, so I didn't come till late Wednesday night. I spent the weekend reading it. I finished it. Fantastic read. I really recommend it. Not just for paranormal people. It's not just about ghosts and haunted places, but the ghosts that we carry with us every person persons who have not left us. They're still with us here in our hearts and minds. Really introspective piece. Fantastic. I laughed a couple times. I nodded many, many times, and I'm going to be honest with you. At the end of one of the chapters, I ugly cried. So I really recommend it. Steve came up with, as a first-time author, I think he made a brilliant piece, and I hope everybody gets a chance to look through it at some point. So highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon, digital, and of course in hard copy. So go find it.
Cool.
Yeah, and then back to work on Monday. So hey, here we are. So
are we sponsoring Steve now, or
I think he should be sponsoring us. All the the revenue he's rolling in for these books. But it's an affordable book. It's like $18. So
yeah,
he's not rich.
No, definitely not. But
there's a partnership opportunity, right? Of course.
Yeah, really, really good guy. Definitely check it out. So
yeah, I agree.
So anyway, but so the ghosts we carry here. How does that tie into what ghosts you're talking about tonight, Jamie?
Well, it does, kind of. So I'm not going to give too much away to start it, but we talk about paranormal stuff because it's paranormal lens, right? And that usually to most means a spooky place, a spooky person, or a thing, a phenomenon of some kind or another, perhaps some equipment, stuff. But at the heart of everything we do here, we're telling a story. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to continue that trend, but this is a bit different. And bear with me.
Okay.
So tonight we're going to talk about Mercy Brown. And Mercy Brown is a person. She lived back in the late 1800s. And she has a bit of a fantastic tale. One that is sad, and one that has a place even in today's times, which we'll talk about at the end. So, without further ado, let me dig into it. So, in the story of, the headline of this is Mercy Brown, vampire victim. So I think we can kind of feel where we might be going. But let me get there first. So, the snow in Exeter, Rhode Island fell quietly that January. It covered the crooked stone walls, the frozen farmland, and the narrow cemetery paths with white silence that felt almost holy. In the winter of 1892, the town seemed suspended between faith and fear. Smoke drifted from chimneys, horses crunched through ice-covered roads, families huddled close to their fireplaces, while death moved steadily from house to house. People whispered about sickness in those days, but not ordinary sickness. This was something worse. They called it consumption. The disease wasted people slowly. Victims became pale and thin. Their ribs showed through their skin. They coughed through the night until blood stained their handkerchiefs crimson. Parents watched children disappear inch by inch and breath by breath. Entire families vanished within a few years. And in Exeter, one family seemed cursed above all others: the Browns. By the time Mercy Brown died at just 19 years old, death had already visited the family repeatedly. Her mother was gone. Her sister was gone. Her brother Edwin was now wasting away in the same horrifying manner. The town needed an explanation. Doctors had none. So the people turned to something older than medicine. They turned to superstition. Soon, frightened neighbors would gather beneath a gray winter sky, open Mercy Brown's grave, cut the heart from her chest, burn it on a rock, and feed the ashes to her dying brother. All because they believed Mercy Brown was a vampire. Today, that story sounds impossible. The Gothic nightmare ripped from folklore. Yet it happened in America, not in medieval Europe. It happened in New England at the age of modern times, during a time when electricity, newspapers, railroads, and scientific progress already existed. But the Mercy Brown case was never truly about vampires. It was about grief. It was about terror. And about what desperate people will believe when death refuses to stop knocking at the door. In the late 19th century, Exeter was a hard place to live. The soil was rocky and stubborn. Farmers fought constantly against the land itself, stacking stones into endless walls that still snake across Rhode Island forests today. Life demanded endurance. Winter could isolate entire families for weeks. Most people lived close together, shared tight quarters, and worked until exhaustion became normal. Then came consumption. Modern medicine knows the disease is tuberculosis, but to the people in the 1800s, it felt supernatural. Victims appeared to be drained from the inside out. They grew skeletal. Their eyes sunk into dark hollows. Night sweat soaked the bed sheets. Bloody coughing fits echoed through homes long after midnight. Worse still, the disease spread silently among relatives. One family member died, then another, then another. No one understood bacteria. No one knew tuberculosis spread through airborne infection. Germ theory was still struggling for acceptance in many rural communities. To frightened families, it seemed as though the dead were somehow pulling the living into the grave behind them. The Browns became one of tuberculosis's cruelest victims. Mary Eliza Brown died first in 1883. Not long afterward, her daughter Mary Olive followed. The family tried to continue. They worked. They mourned. They survived. Then years later, Edwin Brown began to grow sick. Friends watched the young man transform from healthy and energetic into pale and exhausted. He coughed blood. He weakened steadily. Physicians offered little help or hope beyond fresh air and rest, the standard medical advice of the time. Then Mercy herself became ill. She had been healthy while death swallowed the rest of her family, but by 1891, consumption had finally reached her too. For months, she suffered. Then on January 17th, 1892, Mercy Brown died. She was only 19 years old. And yet somehow the nightmare was only beginning. After Mercy's funeral, Exeter's fears deepened into obsession. Edwin Brown continued deteriorating even after his sister was buried. In fact, some believe he worsened. Fever dreams tormented him. According to local accounts, Edwin cried out in terror during the night, convinced someone, or something, was visiting him after dark. Neighbors began whispering. The dead were not resting. New England had long carried fragments of European vampire folklore. Immigrants brought stories from Eastern Europe and the Balkans, tales of corpses returning from graves to prey upon their families. Over generations, those legends blended with Puritan fears and rural isolation. By the 19th century, many New England communities believed that when multiple relatives died from consumption, one of the deceased might be feeding upon the survivor spiritually or physically. The solution was horrifying. Bodies suspected of vampirism were exhumed. Villagers inspected the corpse for signs of undeath, liquid blood, intact organs, or unusual preservation. If discovered, organs were burned to destroy the vampire's power. Today, science explains these phenomena easily. Cold temperatures slow decomposition. Blood can remain in organs after death. Gases within the body can create the illusion of movement or fresh tissue. But terrified, grieving families did not know this. To them, the evidence seemed undeniable. Mercy Brown had become the prime suspect. The irony was devastating. A dead teenage girl, herself a victim of tuberculosis, was now blamed for the suffering of the living. On March 17, 1892, the townspeople opened the graves. It was bitterly cold. A small group gathered in the cemetery in Exeter, while snow covered the ground around them. Among those present were local townspeople, a physician, and newspaper observers who would later spread the story across America. First, they examined the bodies of Mercy's mother and sister. Those corpses showed ordinary decomposition, but Mercy was different. Because she had died during winter, her body had been placed in an above-ground crypt where freezing temperature preserved it naturally. When the grave was opened weeks later, Mercy appeared disturbingly intact. To frightened villagers, this was proof. They found blood in her heart. Her organs appeared to be preserved. In the mind of Exeter's residents, Mercy Brown was no longer merely dead. She was undead. The men cut open her chest, removed her heart and liver. They carried the organs to a nearby rock and burned them in a fire while smoke drifted upwards in the cold March air. The ritual did not end there. The ashes were mixed into a liquid and given to Edwin Brown to drink. Townspeople believed this gruesome tonic might save his life by breaking the vampire's hold over him. It did not work. Edwin died less than 2 months later. Tuberculosis continued exactly as medicine, not superstition, predicted. But by then, Mercy Brown's story had already escaped Exeter, and America could not look away. Newspapers loved the story. By 1892, sensational journalism thrived across the United States. Editors knew readers craved bizarre tales from isolated towns. The Mercy Brown incident spread rapidly throughout newspaper columns, often described with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. Some writers mocked Exeter's superstition. Others treated the case like genuine horror. But the phrase that endured through history was simple: America's last vampire. The label followed Mercy forever. It transformed a young tuberculosis victim into legend. Yet Mercy Brown was not an isolated case. She was part of what historians now call the Great New England Vampire Panic, a strange wave of exhumations and anti-vampire rituals stretching across Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, and other parts of New England during the 18th and 19th centuries. Families throughout the region dug up loved ones searching for supernatural answers to tuberculosis outbreaks. Sometimes hearts were removed. Sometimes bodies were decapitated. Sometimes remains were rearranged or burned. Fear turned grief into ritual. Historian Michael E. Bell later argued that these incidents reflected emotional desperation more than irrational madness. Families were watching loved ones die horribly while doctors stood helpless. Exhumations gave grieving communities a sense of action, however tragic or misguided. In many ways, the people of Exeter were not monsters. They were terrified. The Mercy Brown case becomes less supernatural and far more tragic when viewed through modern science. Tuberculosis was one of history's deadliest diseases. During the 19th century, it killed millions worldwide. In some American cities, it accounted for nearly 1 in every 7 deaths. Its symptoms almost perfectly match vampire folklore. Victims became pale from anemia. They lost dramatic amounts of weight. Blood appeared around the mouth after coughing, and people weakened at night and often looked healthier briefly before collapsing again. Even worse, tuberculosis spread slowly within households. Families watched one relative die after another, sometimes over years. Without understanding infection, it generally appeared as though the dead were somehow consuming the living. And then there was Mercy's body itself. Winter preservation created the illusion of unnatural freshness. Blood pooled inside organs after death. In freezing conditions, decomposition can pause almost entirely. To modern forensic experts, nothing about Mercy's remains suggested anything supernatural. But in 1892, science had not fully reached rural communities like Exeter. Fear had filled the gaps where knowledge should have been. And fear is incredibly persuasive. On a bit of a side note, one of the most fascinating mysteries surrounding Mercy Brown involved a certain famous vampire. You guys ever hear of Dracula?
Mm-hmm.
Bram Stoker published the legendary novel in 1897, only 5 years after Mercy Brown's incident exploded across American newspapers. Some historians believe Stoker may have encountered reports about Exeter's vampire while researching folklore and supernatural traditions. Well, there's no absolute proof, but the timing is difficult to ignore. The late 19th century experienced a surge of public fascination with vampires. Gothic fiction was booming. Newspapers sensationalized folklore. Stories of exhumations and undead accusations traveled internationally. Some scholars speculate Mercy Brown may have influenced the character Lucy Westenra in Dracula, another pale young woman transformed into feared undead figure after death. Whether true or not, Mercy's story clearly entered vampire mythology permanently. The strange irony is impossible to miss. A frightened Rhode Island farming town helped shape global vampire culture, not through fiction, but through tragedy. Now today, Mercy Brown still rests in Exeter. Her grave has become one of Rhode Island's strangest tourist destinations. Paranormal investigators, historians, Gothic enthusiasts, and curious travelers visit the cemetery each year, searching for traces of the legend. Many arrive expecting horror. Instead, they often leave with sadness. Mercy's grave is modest, quiet, human. There are no fangs, no supernatural mysteries, just a resting place of a teenager whose death spiraled into one of America's strangest moral panics. Locals still debate the story, treat it as folklore. Others view it as an embarrassing chapter in New England history. A few insist strange things still happen around the cemetery after dark. But for many historians, the Mercy Brown case reveals something deeper than paranormal fascination. It exposes how fragile human reasoning becomes during collective fear. When death strikes repeatedly and explanations fail, people search desperately for patterns. Sometimes those patterns become myths. Sometimes those myths become violence. And sometimes the victim cannot defend themselves because they are already dead. Mass fear rarely appears irrational to the people living through it. That is what makes the Mercy Brown case so unsettling. Modern readers often laugh at the idea of vampires in 19th century Rhode Island. Yet history repeatedly shows that frightened societies embrace extraordinary beliefs when uncertainty and suffering become overwhelming. The people of Exeter were isolated. Medical science seemed powerless. Consumption spread invisibly. Families watched loved ones die one after another. In such conditions, folklore offered something that medicine could not: certainty. The rituals surrounding the suspected vampires gave grieving families a feeling of control. Digging up graves, burning organs, performing ceremonies, these actions created the illusion that something could still be done, even if it was horrifying. Anthropologists and folklorists studying the New England vampire panic often point out that these rituals reflected emotional survival as much as superstition. Communities were trying to impose order onto chaos. Mercy Brown became the center of that fear because her body appeared preserved. But preservation was not proof of evil, it was proof of winter. More than a century later, Mercy Brown refuses to disappear. Documentaries, podcasts, YouTube creators, and paranormal websites continue retelling the story to new audiences. Online communities often describe Mercy as America's last vampire, though historians note many earlier vampire accusations occurred throughout New England. Others focus on the Gothic imagery of the case: snowy graveyards, burning hearts, desperate villagers, and midnight rituals. But current internet discussions increasingly reinterpret Mercy not as a monster, but as a scapegoat. For decades, vampire legends often erase Mercy's humanity beneath sensationalism. Today, more writers empathize the human suffering underneath the folklore: a grieving father, a dying brother, a terrified town, and a young woman blamed for a disease she never understood. The real horror was never vampirism, it was tuberculosis. The Mercy Brown incident sits at a strange crossroads in American history. It happened during the dawn of modern science, yet ancient superstition still held tremendous power. Germ theory was emerging, scientific discoveries were accelerating, but many rural communities remained disconnected from those advances. The result was a collision between folklore and science. In earlier centuries, vampire accusations were common across parts of Europe. By 1892, however, such beliefs had already seemed outdated to urban Americans. That tension became Exeter's story, especially shocking to newspapers at the time. How could something so medieval happen in modern America? The answer is uncomfortable, because progress is uneven. Fear survives longer than facts. And when people become desperate enough, even educated societies can return to ancient explanations for suffering. Mercy Brown's story remains powerful precisely because it feels impossible, yet undeniably real. The documents exist. The graves exist. The burned organs existed. History preserved every terrible detail. So, was Mercy Brown a vampire? No. She was a 19-year-old girl who died from tuberculosis during one of America's deadliest public health crises. But the question itself reveals why the story still endures. People do not remember Mercy Brown because they believe in vampires. They remember her because the story exposes something timeless about humanity. Fear can overpower reason. Grief can transform love into desperation. Communities under pressure can create monsters from the innocent. In the frozen cemetery in Exeter, the people who opened Mercy Brown's grave believed they were saving a life. They were not evil caricatures from a horror film. They were frightened human beings trapped between old folklore and incomplete science. And Mercy herself became the tragic symbol of that collision. More than a century later, her story still lingers in New England like winter fog drifting through old graveyards. Not because she rose from the dead, but because history never fully buried what happened to her. In the end, Mercy Brown was never America's last vampire. She was one of history's most haunting victims. So, let me cite some sources and we'll discuss.
Mm-hmm.
First, we have lostinhistory.com/the bizarre case of Mercy Brown, vampire victim. Next is allthat'sinteresting.com/Mercy Brown vampire. Smithsonianmag.com/history/the Great New England Vampire Panic 364-82878. Our friends at atlasobscura.com/places/grave Mercy Brown. And lastly, newengland.com/yankee/history/vampire Mercy Brown, Rhode Island.
All right. Well, before we get into discussion, let's catch up on some comments we had earlier. Stefan's here saying hello. Bert and Heather joined us after some technical difficulties, so hello to you guys. Paula is also joining us tonight, so thanks, Paula, for joining us again 2 weeks in a row. We appreciate that. Let's get in some meteor comments here. Heather saying, I cannot believe I've never heard of any of this. Very interesting, getting a good education tonight. This resonates with me because I had also never heard of this story. So it definitely opened my eyes to some things here, Jamie. So nice job. Bert agrees that it's victim. And then Bert also said, so many people lost whole families due to tuberculosis.
Yeah.
I think, and then Heather just said, sounds like the Salem witch trials, but this is harder to understand how it could be believed because the people had a lot more education. And Paula said, great storytelling, Jamie.
Thank you.
So we're in the time that we live in, we look back on this and we go, how could that have happened?
Yeah.
But putting ourselves in that time and in that place, it does make sense. Like, because they were uneducated, at least in this part of the country. I mean, you know, it's rural towns, and even some rural towns now don't have the same education that we do in cities and universities and things like that.
Yeah. Well, Exeter is still a fairly rural place, and if you've ever driven I-95 into Rhode Island, you know, from going up to say Boston or Providence, you've passed right through the area. It's southern Rhode Island, and it's right on the corridor. It struck me when I looked at it, you know, on the map, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've passed by here a gazillion times, you know. When my lobster runs, you know, to Maine. No, kidding, I don't go to Maine for lobster, but you know, like I know somebody who does actually.
Right.
But that, you know, now it's in the heart of like urban areas, even though it is still sort of rural. But it is one of those things where, you know, if you go back 100 years, you know, it's hard for us in modern times to go back, you know, because we can't relate to that same thing. But you know, transportation was limited. The winter months were shutdown times, you know, especially in the New England weather with snow and everything. You know, you would, like the beginning I started with, you know, they were there for weeks at a time in their home, you know, and the worst thing that could happen was having tuberculosis come home with you and you're locked in, you know, to think about it, you know, you're shuttered. So it is, and without, just go back to COVID, how difficult it was to get folks on board with wearing a mask. And not saying anything about that, but just the process, you know, and the understanding of what we have in modern science about airborne infections and this, how it's spread, and the protection that the mask can provide you, and the pushback that we got from parts of our communities. You know, they didn't even know to do that then. Masks technically didn't exist the way they do now. It would be a handkerchief or a scarf or something if they knew to do that much.
Right.
And without any access to science or any advancements in that rural community, they wouldn't even know
Right.
anything to do. So it is just exactly what it sounds like. It is this creeping death that comes from nowhere and takes people slowly.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be horrifying, especially when you can't go anywhere. Like, you're there with that person. You cannot comfort your family. You can't do anything to help or support them. There is no resource to take to them to, or give them. It's amazing. And looking back, like, how could this happen? But it did. It happened over and over and over again, all around the world.
Right. Paul also said COVID was also noticed. I think we meant no real answer for treatment. But yeah, so, well, and the situation where, assuming that there was a family member was a vampire and going and digging up all the graves, well, if if you had all of them that you had dug up and you found one that the organs were intact, the logic in that time would have been, oh, there's something different with this. It must be a vampire. It's not like we can blame them for being unknowledgeable. It just because they just didn't have the knowledge. Like,
Right. Well, it is exactly that. You revert to what you know, regardless of the advances of the times. You fall back to what you know, and you trust what your experiences are. And anytime you're in the northern states, in the wintertime, the ground is frozen. It is impractical to try to dig a grave, especially in 1892 with a shovel, a hand shovel, out in the backyard kind of thing, or wherever they are in the graveyard in this case. But it's not practical. So the above ground vault would have been, for lack of a better term, the cold storage that we would have now in a morgue, or a medical facility. And fear and the shared piece of this, where if this is what you come across, doesn't come to mind at that point, because what you see is what you would know to be a vampire.
Yeah. Kirstin, what do you think?
I think she's a victim. I mean, I know we're like saying like how like even in the comments, like, how could they like not know and everything. I think Heather said it the best way. You look at the Salem witch trial and the hysteria that happened there. A lot of that time period was based on faith. There was a lot of faith and religion, and I think that was their only way of kind of reasoning as to why this is happening.
Right.
There's got to be a vampire, and they're not. I don't want to say they're not looking into the medical side of it, because I don't know, like, I don't have the knowledge of knowing what medicine was like back in that time.
Right.
Yeah.
But I feel like there just was a weird mass hysteria, and people were just grasping at whatever they could to have like, this is the cause of this problem.
Right. That sort of ties into a comment that Bert has here. Even medicine has advanced a lot in the last 130 years. So it's hard to imagine that they did not know about these diseases back then. So, and and it's still advancing.
Yeah.
Every day we're making new discoveries. I don't think, it's another rabbit hole. I don't think we know 10% of what we could find out about the human body and health and illnesses and stuff like that.
Sure.
So.
Well, go backwards though to that era, and with what we have now, we have access to everything at our fingertips, right? It's in our pocket, right? And then news spread by two means: one, word of mouth, which someone had to come to you, and two, by newspaper, which you had to go get. And not everybody had the resources to connect to either of those things, depending on the weather and the climate and their location and so forth. There are people who didn't see others for a long time, and drastic things can change, in that window. Think about how quickly And I'll go off of the COVID direction, but right now in Africa there's an Ebola virus outbreak.
Yes.
It is by record the third worst in history, and it's happening in our time. And if I didn't see an article about that today, I would not even know it's happening. And it's been going on since March. So here we are 3 months down the line, and it's not national, it's not world news yet necessarily. Although plenty of people there are infected, dying, their conditions are poor. Same idea, where they have limited access to resources. It's what we would consider a third world country. So modern science and medicine may not be readily available, at least not in the rural areas where the virus is out, the bigger outbreak is, and it's happening in front of us. Where we wonder how it could have happened 130 years ago. I'm wondering how it can happen today.
Right.
But it is. And that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wasn't also the hantavirus that was around the same time? But by the time we heard about it, it was like weeks before the first. Yeah. I mean, yeah, even still now, there's still a delay of getting news of these viruses and how they're moving.
Yeah. I think that's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah.
We're not going to touch that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So to kind of put a bow to Mercy Brown, paranormal or not, I say no, but I can understand the fear and the perception of reality that the people in Exeter and everywhere in New England, were experiencing at the time, anywhere around the world, really, where if you were disconnected from the true world news and the updates and what we would consider instant updates, which would take a newspaper the next day to report. And Chad, you and I are old enough to know what that's like, right? So, you knew your news is always a day behind. In this case, by the time the paper even got to you, it might be a couple days or weeks behind. Who knows? I get this. I do. And I think that's why the story still has legs today, is that, we still have people in rural communities who are intentionally disconnected at this point because there is too much saturation of all of this stuff. The information, the information superhighway is fantastic, but sometimes you need to take an exit and take that time to unplug and disconnect from it. But while you're doing that, who knows what has happened by the time you reconnect. And unfortunately, sometimes it could be detrimental.
Yep. Looking back on this episode, I wish we could have had Sean and Jeff with us tonight.
Yeah,
they would have
good
insight on this and the folklore side of it and why it's still living and so next time we talk to them, we'll have to throw this one at them and see if they know anything about it. But it's the folklore that keeps things like this going.
Yep. So that's a good point.
So
I honestly would be interested of their opinions on this.
All right.
Just pick their brains.
That's an easy message. We'll reach out.
Oh yeah.
Well, we'll have to do a follow up on this part 2 in a month or so and see what they think. So
yes, please.
Excellent.
So nice job, Jamie. Again, something that it's sad that I don't think we know about.
No,
because it is definitely something that a lot of people do know about, but not everybody does.
Yeah, I've never heard of this before, so interesting and fascinating.
Well, this is why I was saying it was different. It's not a traditional haunted thing or place or person. It's not the normal that we would cover, but we cover a lot of different things. So I felt we should circle around it. Paula has a comment here. The Salem witch trials seems something that turned out some believe was people being affected by yeast fermentation. There is a gas that is released from the yeast, and with no proper ventilation, that can cause hallucinations. I can't even use English. Come on, hallucinations to some extent. I read a lot of stuff here. Give me a little grace. Oh my gosh, that's an interesting point. And I thought of the Salem witch trials, in parallel to this. It happened sooner, of course, but the mass hysteria, the belief in something. And all it takes is a ringleader, someone of some
Yeah.
prominence or authority to say something, and others follow the path. You know, and there, it's different, but to me, there's a parallel at least.
Mm-hmm.
With mass hysteria, perception becoming reality,
Mm-hmm.
and victims become, who are innocent, became just horrible perception in the community, and therefore they were burned at the stake. I mean, it's just nuts, like how we let that happen.
Mm-hmm. So Bert says, so where are we road
Yes.
tripping to? Mercy Brown's grave?
Sure,
Road trip.
we sure can. It's right off I-95 on the way to
Hey,
Providence, so
and
it's in Rhode Island.
any trip to New England's a good trip to New England, right, Jamie?
No, I have one planned.
I know.
I'm gonna have to keep Paula's comment, because I do have a plan, like closer to the anniversary of the witch trials, to do an episode. And
Okay.
the amount of information I have, that is actually one of the things that, when I was looking it up, came up. So I want to keep that comment, because it'll most likely be covered in that episode.
Okay.
Great.
So Paula's comment is, it's an interesting place to visit. So Paula, have you visited there? Was this something you already knew about? So I was going to I'll throw this up. I was going to put this poll up, but I think Jamie sort of answered our questions. I was going to, have everybody vote, but there's no point, because I think we're all going to vote number 2 on this anyway. But
You still can vote, of course.
so if you want to, in the comments, #1, #2, #3 to vote, it'll tally. So, and then Paula said that she's been there 7 times.
That is cool.
Wow.
And
Bert says it's on the way back to Wilson Castle. Yes, kind of, anyway. And
Somewhat.
it's a little bit of a swerve, but and then the maple ice cream, which maple creamies is officially what they call it in New England. Yeah. I'll let the cat out of the bag here a little bit, but I'm heading back to Vermont the week of the 15th. It's vacation, but I have some things planned to stop and see along the way. Wilson's a little far to the north of where I'll be, but I can certainly make my way up to Rutland again, or West Rutland as it is, which is where the soft serve place that Bert's talking about is, at the Maple Angus restaurant. If you're in the area, I recommend it.
I
Plugging
think
everybody tonight, right? Why not?
Yeah.
I think we need to
Book,
schedule a trip to Wilson Castle anyway. So
yeah.
I have yet to be at Wilson Castle, so
I'm all in for a return. And that was a great night.
I haven't been there.
Yep.
I think I got invited, but it was literally 3 days before I was going to have Cassie, so it was like,
yeah, I was.
Might not have been the most comfortable ride.
maybe I don't go all the way up to New England and ghost hunt.
I agree with Bert here.
Yep.
Road trip.
And Kirstin. So
yes. Road trip.
So
I'm pretty sure it was the Lynches that invited me too, and it was like, I can't.
Yeah, and I was at camp, or I was traveling, or had just gotten back or something, so I couldn't do it either. But
it was right at the end of camp. I remember that, because it was a week or 2 away already.
So
logistics, that's everything, and that's why we plan these things so far in advance, to get out around our schedules and the restrictions we may have, clear up the space we need. And
so, well, Jamie, nice job bringing something new to us. We appreciate that.
Of course.
Let's go ahead and talk about what's coming up. Kirstin, you want to run with this?
Oh, it's my turn. So next week we're going to be doing Shadows of the Yokai, Spirits of Japanese Folklore. I'm very, very excited for this. I like kind of looking up all the nice little spirits and everything of other countries. Also terrified.
Yeah.
I'll have stories about when I was in Japan and a friend scaring me with some things. So
very cool.
Yeah.
All right. And then coming up from that, on June 16th, we have the Crescent Hotel, where the cure became the curse. And that is with Chad. And then on June 23rd, we're back with Jamie for the Fresno Nightcrawler, which still very excited for.
And we'll have a guest host that night because I won't be here. Alex will be in
That's
my place.
right.
Yep.
It'll becomes ghost stuff then.
No. Maybe. All right, maybe. Isn't always ghost stuff somewhat?
It's always ghost stuff. All right. And then June 30th, I'm back for Ashmore Estate History and Experiences because I will be just getting back from having a nice little investigation there. I'm going solo finally.
Very cool.
Then July 7th, we have no show. We're going to kind of do a reset before we start up with our next season, so season 4, which will be on July 14th, and I believe that's Chad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how do you pronounce that one word?
Landhold's Mohican Castle.
Landol's Mohican Castle.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So that's what we have coming up so far.
Yeah.
If you want to get in contact with us, there's a few different ways you can do that. We'll get into that comment in a bit. One of the ways you can contact us is through our team's website, which is www.Jott-Nyx paranormal.com. Or you can email us at info@paranormal-lens.com. We also have a link tree, which is linktr.ee/paranormal-lens. And if you want to support the podcast at all, you can also go to a Buy Me a Coffee. Even if you don't support us, it's all good. We're not going anywhere. That's just to kind of help with our funds for running all the program and everything for the podcast. And that is buymeacoffee.com/paranormal9. Or if you're watching it, there is a nice little QR code right now up on the screen that you can scan to get right there.
Yep.
I finally made it. I didn't mess it up.
So we had we had 3 votes. I didn't refresh, but we had 3 votes for victim. Everything else was at 0. So I think we all are in agreement on that. So
there is a comment that I just saw from that has to do with Celtic Fling.
Yep.
I will be there. I will be working. Sadly, I'm going to be in a building, but on the few occasions I'm walking around, if you run into me, say hi. Let's snap a photo. I'm down to meet people.
Mm-hmm. So, and do you want to address what's wrong with ghost stuff?
There is nothing wrong with ghost stuff. I need to get the clip and everything. I'm pretty sure it is still on the paranormal team's TikTok.
It is.
One of the first investigations I did with the team, we were at White Hill, and up in the attic, Jamie and Chad's son Alex, we are over in one room. I'm with another former member. We were setting up, and we're ready to go in this one room, and we're just watching this red light in the other room, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And it was a perfect filming. I don't know who was filming, but I just shouted down the hall, "What's going on?" And Jamie, without anything, just goes, "Ghost stuff."
Mm-hmm. And I added, "That's kind of what we do, you know."
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we kind of do ghost stuff.
And it lived on.
So.
Which is why now Alex and I, if it's ever just us two hosting here, it's ghost stuff. It's no longer Paranormal Lens.
Yep. So, Stefan said you'll have to check out Allie the Piper.
I will definitely check her out. I follow her on TikTok.
Yeah.
She's very talented.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing. So, I also want to shout out that next Monday, June 8th, I'm going to be on the Stay Haunted podcast with our friends who do that podcast. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about our experiences at the Clifton that we had with the Spanish speaking. I think that still baffles Alex, hearing Spanish in his head when he doesn't know a word of Spanish.
Yeah.
So, and a couple other things, but it's always good to talk to that group, a good group of people. So looking forward to everybody there. So, Yeah. And any other thoughts tonight before we wrap up, guys?
No, I don't. Good.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Tonight we explored one of America's most infamous supernatural legends, a tale of sickness, superstition, and a young woman whose name became immortalized. I'm having the same trouble as Jamie here in vampire lore. Whether you believe Mercy Brown was the center of a genuine paranormal mystery or the victim of community desperate for answers, her story remains one of the most fascinating chapters in American folklore. So thank you for spending part of the evening with us. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. And until our next investigation, stay alert, stay respectful, and stay curious. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.